Hello, my name is Loreli, and I'm the Young Parents Director at Youth Unlimited Toronto. Welcome to another Hope That Helps interview. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. She's over there. Anna Maria Fruscione is a friend of mine. She is a registered dietitian who will be speaking to us about eating, basically, about food, which is a really big topic right now. But how to eat and how to be healthy about it. So, Anna Maria, first of all, did I say your last name properly?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It's pretty good. I struggled.
It's totally
For
okay.
those watching, how would we say it properly?
Fruscione.
Fruscione. I missed the Fruscione.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
very close.
okay. So let me start by asking you a little bit about your passion for this topic.
Yeah. So, Lorelei, as you said, I'm a registered dietitian. I work with a variety of different age groups, anywhere from babies and parents with picky eating and concerns around feeding babies, as well as older adults, and kind of everything in between. Working with people who have different types of concerns, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, digestive issues. But I really love food, and I think that's kind of where my passion fits in here. That I enjoy food, and I enjoy how food can both nourish us, but it can also be a source of enjoyment.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that I really love about food is that it brings us together. We gather over food and
Yeah.
we celebrate over food. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the challenges right now because we can't necessarily do that outside of our immediate family that we live with.
No, and
So
that's
yeah,
exactly one of the reasons why I've asked you on here because
hmm
um, really meal times or food has become the main event or the event
yeah,
of quarantine. Like this is
yeah,
how we're spending our time. So um, I'd like to ask you to speak directly to that to give us some hope there because it's
yeah,
also a place of despair when we feel out of control. So how can
for
we
sure.
navigate this well in this season?
For sure. Yeah. So the thing with food is I said it was enjoyable, but it also can be a source of stress, especially right now when, we don't know maybe what to prepare for our families. We don't know what to prepare for ourselves. And even thinking of going to the grocery store is an ordeal in itself, right? When we're, not knowing how to navigate that and the stress just of going out in general. So I think one thing that can be helpful when we're thinking of how to navigate food could be focusing on how can we meal plan, but also keep it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
So one thing that I find helpful when we're thinking of meals, because I know I have a lot of patients and people that ask me, well, how do I balance a meal? How do I make a healthy meal? And our meals don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be Instagram worthy. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I think if we consider how to have variety in our meals, that can be helpful. So a simple guide that I use is called a balanced plate or a plate model. And I'll show you a little example of what that looks
Okay.
like. So might have seen that before. It's just the idea of having half a plate vegetables, or at least trying to have one or maybe more than one vegetable at our meal. It doesn't have to look exactly like that, but just that variety. And then also having some type of protein option. So you can think of using your fist, so about the palm of your fist for some type of protein. That can be meat or an alternative like beans, legumes. Those are also great sources, and they're very affordable, and they're also very shelf stable, which is great right now. And then some type of starch options. We can think of using a fist to help kind of guide that part of our plate as well, and that can be really useful just to think of that variety. And it doesn't have to be the typical meat, potatoes, vegetables. It can take a form of like a stew or a soup or a curry, and we can have all those different foods and mixed into there. So it doesn't have to look exactly that way. It's just the idea of the variety, because we get more nutrients when we have variety in our diets.
Okay,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
can you show me that plate again?
Sure. Yes, I can.
So is this I how where do we like that's such a good visual.
Yeah.
It's such a good visual. Is
Yeah.
it something that you I mean, I'm getting off topic here, but
Yeah, that's
that's
okay.
really helpful because sometimes there's a lot of information
hmm
coming at us. So that
Exactly.
visual helps us see portions, which is
Right.
kind of what you're talking about,
hmm
keeping it simple related to
Right.
portions. Okay, that's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be exactly like that as I was mentioning it. Just the idea of the variety, having a little bit of the different types of groups of food, because that helps us to get more nutrients. The
Okay,
more variety, the more nutrition, essentially. So
okay, yeah.
yeah,
Keep it
yeah.
simple.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing that can be helpful is when we're thinking of meal planning, to think of some meals that we might want to make for the week. So say there's some favorites that you or your family has, consider those, and then maybe think of other recipes that might have similar ingredients. So when you're out shopping, you can buy, a bag of broccoli and then use it for a few different things, or some pasta and use it for a few different dishes. Yeah. So that can be really helpful. And even considering leftovers, so making a little extra, having it for lunch the next day, then you don't have to worry about what you or your family is going to eat for lunch, and it's done. That can be really helpful. And then the other thing around meal planning is we want to consider how can we build routine into our day? Because right now things are out of the norm, right? Everything's very different than what we're used to. So if we think of, routine can be helpful, trying to stick to as much as possible of a pre-quarantine routine, whether that's work or school for your family. So trying to get into some type of, regular eating 3 meals, a few snacks there if needed. Children usually need about 2 to 3 snacks depending on their age, and try to help to stay within those kind of set times of meals so that we're not grazing as much between meals. And even for children, that can be really helpful so that we have an appetite for the meal. So one thing that you can use with children is to say, the kitchen is closed outside of those set meal time and snacks. So we're not constantly grazing, and that can help children to develop being able to listen to their body's hunger and fullness cues, so that they know, when they're satisfied, and then when, they're hungry, and can be able to learn to trust that, which can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I guess that means we have to close it to ourselves too, right?
I think that can be helpful. It's important to listen to our bodies as well, right? And there's times we're going to be more hungry and times we're less hungry, and that's normal. It's normal for children, that's normal for adults. So just being kind of tuning into that can be helpful.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the next thing which I want to talk about is shopping smart. So as I was mentioning, it's a very stressful time. I normally love grocery shopping. I find it interesting looking at all the different types of foods. But right now, I feel the stress, and I know that's shared by probably everyone. You can see it in people's eyes when you're in the grocery store. So it's not exactly a fun task to undertake right now. But what can be helpful when we're planning our shopping trip is to start with a grocery list. So if we were to think, as I was mentioning, what do I want to make for the week? What are some things that my family enjoys? So start with, writing down some of those ideas, and then checking your pantry. See what you have already at home, because you might have some of those grocery items, then you don't need to buy them. And once we jot those down, what we have, we can think of what we need. And that can also help us save money and save time, because we want to get in and out of that store, pretty efficiently. We don't really want to linger in there, and we want to be able to go home and, do what we need to do. So starting with that list, and then with the grocery list, what can also be helpful is categorizing it by, section of the grocery store. So if you normally go to one specific type of store or one, place that you go to, think of when you're walking in, sort of picture it and think, do I normally go to this section first? If that's part of the normal flow of the store. So say it's like the produce section, then group all those foods together so you don't have to kind of run around the store trying to find what you need. And then the meat section or the dry goods section, the frozen food section, whatever that is, trying to arrange it that way.
Yeah, those are good COVID instructions too, aren't they?
Because for sure, yeah.
We're not just walking around in the whatever potential.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's not really a leisurely activity.
So that makes so much sense. And I really like the idea of taking account of what's already in your cupboard. Sometimes we just look for what's missing or what we feel like purchasing. Right. So I like that idea of assessing and looking at what's already in your cupboards. I can't say that comes naturally to me anyway. So very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing with shopping is that it can be helpful in terms of our pantry to, every time we go out, we can maybe add to it a little bit. We don't have to go out and hoard things or, get a large amount of food. But if we're able to get a few extra items that are shelf stable, it can be really helpful. So things like, I brought some props here. So things like rice can be a helpful one. Dried beans, canned beans, those can be really canned. These are chickpeas, any type of legume or beans. And these can be put in a lot of different recipes, whether we're making soups or stews or curries, even on a salad, open up the beans, wash them off, throw them in a salad for a little extra protein and fiber. That can be really helpful. And you can dress them up with other flavors. They don't necessarily need to be eaten plain. We can want to enjoy our flavors and have different types of, interesting foods. Other types of shelf-stable things would be potatoes, which last typically for a couple weeks. It's a sweet potato, canned tuna, canned salmon. Those can also be really useful to make sandwiches or casseroles or different types of things like that. Broth you can use to make a lot of recipes, or any type of broth. These are just examples. These are what I had in my house. There's no particular brand that you need to get, just whatever you can find. And then frozen vegetables are really helpful. So you can get, collapsing here. You can get different types of frozen vegetables, whether they're mixed or individual. Especially with when we're not shopping as often, the frozen vegetables can be really, really helpful. And even other times, I really love frozen vegetables because they're just as nutritious as fresh. They're more affordable and they last a really long time. So if you're worried about wasting, a head of broccoli, you don't have to worry about that with frozen vegetables.
Yeah, that's great. And I should mention, we have no paid sponsors for this.
Yes, no.
But we can see what you like and what you use, and that's helpful to us too.
And lots of different options.
Yeah, and it's all pretty normal stuff. You're a registered dietitian, so you're not buying anything fancy or different than anyone else, which is great to know as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so my last main point here is one that I'm really passionate about. And I know that might seem ironic because I think people have the idea that, healthy eating equals eating perfectly, but that's absolutely not true. It's actually, not true at all. So, food is meant to be enjoyed. We're meant to enjoy different flavors of food and enjoy different types of food. Some might be more nutritious than others. So I like to call, when we're thinking of different types of foods, are everyday foods and then are sometimes foods. And this type of language can be really useful with children. So no food is good or bad, no food is junk, but it's just different. And ideally, we want to have a variety of foods because then we get the most nutrition. And when we're having, our everyday foods, those are things like that balanced plate with our fruits and vegetables, protein, some type of fiber, starch option that can be really great. But also having those other things that may be less nutritious and we can still enjoy. So really kind of thinking about that, idea of variety can be really helpful. And then also, this, keeping in mind, this is a very stressful time. So I know a lot of people are adding to that stress by, thinking to themselves, well, I have to eat perfectly, or I'm eating different, or I'm, eating for comfort or stress eating. And it's important to know that this is normal. It's normal that, we're doing this. It's not abnormal. You're not, strange for doing this. This is very, very common. And we need to be compassionate with ourselves, understanding that it's okay, sometimes to eat for comfort. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Ideally, we want to have other tools in our toolbox that can help to manage stress and anxiety, whether it's going for a walk or calling or FaceTiming a friend or having a family dance party, whatever that looks like, listening to music. Those self-care strategies can be really helpful. But also being compassionate with ourselves around that, food is going to look different right now, and our eating habits are likely going to be different. That's okay.
Yeah.
So we don't need to eat perfectly.
That's so helpful. Honestly, I think I've been mixing up my sometimes food, my with my regular foods during this quarantine, and
that's okay.
Thank you, first of all, but also it's good to be reminded by your expertise. Very simple instructions here that help us reorient ourselves to the task at hand. To say, truly eating well helps us cope, doesn't it? Like, I think as much as thank you for your compassion, I also notice a difference when I eat unhealthy in my own moods, my own mood and how I'm processing being at home. So I think that these are very basic strategies, but very powerful if they're put into practice.
For sure. And just the idea of, nourishing yourself like that, the nutrients that can help us feel good and really focusing on how we feel, right? Food is fuel and it's also enjoyment. So kind of having, both of those things in that perspective can be really helpful.
Yes, wonderful. So thank you so much, Anna Marie.
You're very welcome.
And I just hope young parents, as you're watching this, would love to hear back from you. Any feedback about your own eating and how you're feeding yourself and your children. Love your questions. I know that Anna Maria has given me some resources that I'll be posting throughout the week so that we can refer to those. And the other part is you can always reach out with questions for help, for someone to walk with you through this. You don't have to do this alone either. So wanted to give that encouragement to you, and thank you again, Anna Maria.
You're very welcome. Thank
Appreciate
you.
your expertise, and for those watching, we hope this helps. We'll see you soon.
Take care.